Good evening and a very warm welcome to you all, those here in Senate House and those who are joining us by Zoom. It's my very great pleasure to welcome Miriam David and her daughter Charlotte Reiner, who will be joining us via Zoom. The topic this evening is the locked safe, the story behind the story. In this talk, Miriam David discusses how and why she came to write her backstory. She considers British internment and looks ahead to her own generation, the so-called second generation, and that of her own daughter, Charlotte, the third generation. Miriam David is Professor Emerita in Sociology of Education at the UCL Institute of Education. Her publications include Being Second Generation, 2021, and with Miriam Moose has edited Debating the Zeitgeist, also 2021. Charlotte Reiner, her daughter, graduated from the University of Cambridge and holds a master's degree from the University of Durham and University College London. She has taught in both primary and secondary schools and is currently a freelance or a tutor. The Locked Safe is a family memoir, and it is my great pleasure to invite Miriam, who has spoken before, to proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Iana. And thank you for organising this seminar. And I want to thank everybody for being here. And it's a rather overwhelming week, I think. And for those of you who are Jewish, it's between the Jewish New Year and the Day of Atonement. And at the moment, there's a lot of mourning about the 7th of October. And in addition, the Palestinian losses, and now those on the West Bank and in Lebanon too. So I feel it's rather a difficult moment to be talking about this. I have got a PowerPoint presentation. For those of you on Zoom, I think it's already there, you can see it. Charlotte's also going to speak after me and give a reading from our book. Charlotte's written a chapter about her namesake and paternal grandmother, whom she never met, and her father's family, who were Jewish refugees from Hungary. Her father was born in Miskolc in Hungary in January 1946. So Charlotte's the daughter of a refugee from Hungary after World War II or the Holocaust, and she sees herself as third generation. She has to be on Zoom, but will also share her screen. And I am also going to read a few extracts from the book, from what I regard as the most important section. So, The Locked Safe is about my sisters and my family journey to find out more about our parents and their backgrounds, or my backstory, as Jana's already said, once we'd found the locked safe after my parents had both died. Are we second generation, with a father escaping anti-Semitism or persecution through Nazism, now named the Holocaust, and my mother's family escaping Russian pogroms in the late 19th century from what is now Ukraine? And what are the long-term consequences of being daughters of refugees from Nazism, people who might today be called asylum seekers, migrants, or refugees? So specifically, I'm going to try this again. The locked safe or metal box, it was a small metal box, contained 5 German passports with Nazi insignia. And this is a picture of what all of them, 4 of the 5 of them look. In addition, they all have the letter J on them and a swastika on the German eagle. The three women's passports had the name Sarah inserted after their first names, and my grandfather Adolf, who you can see here, had Israel inserted. These four passports, there's my grandmother's with Sarah inserted. These four passports were issued after 1938, when Hitler took over more legal powers. This is my great-grandmother's, and this one is my great-aunt Clara's. In 1938, the Nazis made it a legal requirement to have the name Israel or Sarah, including on passports for Jewish people, including changing birth certificates and marriage and divorce certificates. As an aside, this and our Aunt Clara, who is the only one of these relatives that we know at all and at all well. We used to visit her regularly in her Jewish refugee care home in Manchester, Morris Feynman House. We thought this is a picture of her house, and this is a photo of myself outside the house taken by my son later when he was at Manchester University. We thought she was a spinster or widow without children. We actually discovered through research after we found the lock safe that she'd married on the 10th of May, 1906, aged 23, to a man called Albert Koch in Niedervollstadt, the village that, this is a picture of the house, and this is a picture of the village Niedervollstadt in Hessen in Germany. She married in Niedervollstadt on the 10th of May, and she had a son, Eugen, born on the 1st of November, 1906, less than 6 months after her marriage. In today's parlance, it was a shotgun wedding. She lived in Mainz for 9 years until the divorce. Oh, sorry. And after Mainz, she returned to Niedervollstadt. Her son, Eugen, lived for some time in Langenschwelbach, or now Bad Schwelbach, and died there in 1923, aged 16, and was at the time a baker's apprentice. Did he have what now might be called neurodiversity? Unfortunately, we will never know. He has a very simple gravestone in the Jewish cemetery in Mainz, which says, "To our beloved only son, Eugen Koch." Now, to return to the main story, my father's passport was the final passport in the lock safe. This was issued in 1935, before Hitler was fully in legal command. His did not have Nazi insignia, but was full of stamps, as he had to leave the UK every 6 months before World War II. We knew that he was a machine tool designer. His passport says his occupation, I think it's on the next page there, his occupation was a diploma engineer or qualified engineer. The National Archives at Kew confirmed that he came to a post as machine tool designer at Kendall and Gent in Gorton, Manchester. And according to a translated postcard to his parents, he was met off the train at Manchester Piccadilly by the managing director. According to the passport as well, he left what was then NISA and is now NISA in Poland, where there are disastrous floods in the last few weeks. And that's a postcard he sent to his parents. And this is a map of the German Empire, and the arrow points to where NISA, or now NISA, is. We also know that my father spent 3 years in Berlin at the world-famous Technische Hochschule. And this is a picture of him working with a Professor Georg Schlesinger, who continued to help him after they both were in Britain. Schlesinger was importantly, that's a picture of the Technische Hochschule, and this discusses from an exhibition in Berlin in 2013 what Berlin was like in 1933. According to the Technical University of Berlin website, in 2023, Schlesinger spent the years 1933 to 34 imprisoned by the Nazis because he was Jewish. He was finally allowed to leave Germany, but with no pension or money. He went first to Switzerland, then to Belgium, where my father visited him en route to England, and then Schlesinger himself arrived in the UK in 1938. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. The final stamp in my father's passport was from Fleetwood on the 7th of March, 1941. And it was when my father returned from the Isle of Man to Lancashire after release from internment or imprisonment without trial and being a prisoner of war. There is no stamp in Adolf's passport for his return from Haydn, and we don't have Kurt's elder brother's passport to check. Back to the story, though. We found the locked safe, or metal box, when cleaning our mother's flat in North Finchley after she died in early 1996. This was 16 years after my father, who died in Peterborough on the 2nd of January 1980. This is now almost 45 years ago. So we couldn't ask our parents, but these various documents, etc., fill in the lacunae in our knowledge and expand it about refugees and the feelings evoked. These have long-term social and psychological consequences about anxieties, deprivation, discrimination, dislocation, displacement, loss, and trauma. They are, I believe, relevant for migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees today. So, this story is not a straightforward story, as we found a large collection of documents, letters, postcards, all scattered around after we found the locked safe, but mainly in the family sideboard. They were all unfiled, and we needed to get many of them, most of them, translated. There was also a postcard album that my mother had given her elder sister for her 21st birthday over 100 years ago that gave us more information, and a German photo album over 150 years old, from which we found some key photographs. During our lifetime, as I write in the book, we were only told happy stories about our parents' backgrounds, especially my father's life in Germany and my mother's life growing up in Manchester. We knew that both our parents were graduates and valued education highly, my mother having been a teacher in Manchester for over 10 years. For my mother, it meant that as a graduate, she had 2 votes, significant to the story. And she was clearly a memorable teacher to many of her pupils, and many of them were Jewish pupils because she taught at the main school in the Jewish community in Manchester called Temple School. These included famous people like the late Maisie Moscow and the late Rabbi Louis Jacobs. And we knew far more about my paternal grandmother, Clemmie's family, than my grandfather Adam's family. And this is a picture of grandmother Clemmie with her 6 brothers and sisters in Friedberg. We didn't even, this is a picture of my grandparents' wedding, but we didn't even know that Adolf originally had three sisters. Selma, who married Herman Stern and had 4 children, went to live.
Pretty much neutralized to the defenses of Downs. Exactly, and the road is paved. Makes a lot of Americans do it for you. But we've never asked in our history of America to fight our war with to send soldiers to fight our wars.
Sorry about
that.
that.
I think they're defending themselves because you think about it, Israel escalated the war in Lebanon. Israel decided to assassinate the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, a very big ally of theirs.
You're now on mute, so we can't hear you. I can't hear anything. Don't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, sorry, we didn't know that Adolf had 3 sisters, Selma, who married Herman Stern and had 4 children, and the 4 children went to live in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And significantly, their father fought in World War I.
Yes.
And this is Selma Stern's gravestone next to her father's. She died at the age of 50, and her husband had received the Iron Cross posthumously for bravery in France. In addition, my Aunt Clara, who I've already mentioned, was a twin, and she had her sister Bella, who died aged about 4. And this is a picture of Clara's prayer book with details of her and her twins' birthdays. And this is a picture from that album that we found of the twins in about 1885. This is another picture of her with her mother. We also didn't know that Adolf fought in World War I and eventually in 1934, 20 years later, applied for and received the so-called Hindenburg Cross of Honor for bravery fighting in World War I. He received it in 1935, by which time Hindenburg had died, and it was the Hitler Cross of Honor. But many German Jews applied for and received this Cross of Honor, hoping that it would save them, but it did not. We found the certificate, but not the cross, in amongst the jumble of papers. These stories of discrimination and deprivation came as a shock. None of us speak German or read adequate German to be able to translate colloquial German and old script handwriting. It was only when Nancy, my old school friend from my grammar school, was willing to translate them for free in 2022 to 2023 that I got the full information about my father's family life in Germany and their eventual escape from Nazism, mainly just a month before World War II began. Nancy, my school friend, had read German at university. Her professor was also a non-Jewish refugee from Germany, a Professor Keith Spalding, and she was intrigued to read and translate the postcards and story letters. My elder sister Judy embarked upon the journey of finding out about our family, but developed Parkinson's with dementia and was not able to complete it. Her son Tony found the last and most significant tranche of letters in a brown bag when he was clearing out his parents' house as a prelude to selling it in spring 2022. And this bag was mainly about the year 20th of June 1940 to the 22nd of June 1941. And that's what I'm going to talk about in a moment. But my sister Judy wrote an essay almost 20 years ago now about her German-Jewish roots trip 20 years before that. And she went to Frankfurt am Main, and this is the mikveh, or Jewish well, in Friedberg. And this is a picture of her and her two sons and husband there. And she said in her essay, "This history must not be forgotten." I agree and have taken this as a kind of order. So, part 3 of the book is entitled War, Internment and its Iniquitous Aftermath. This is based upon what happened to my father, his father, and his elder brother Ernst, who, together with my great-grandmother Bertha, Clementine and Clara, all became enemy aliens on the 3rd of September 1939. This is because they came from a country at war with the UK. At that time, all foreigners were called aliens. And in the United States, until very recently, foreigners are still called aliens. As the 4 passports indicate with their stamps, my grandparents, Adolf and Clemmy, and my great-grandmother Bertha and daughter Clara had all arrived a month earlier than war began, the 31st of July 1939. They were 4 lucky ones in the sense that they flew from Cologne via Amsterdam to Manchester Ringway Airport. And my father wrote in English in a postcard to my mother, who was on a holiday, all 4 arrived safely at Manchester Ringway Airport. But how safe were they really? My uncle Ernst was probably the most tragic. He arrived in Manchester in April 1939, having been in Dachau. This is a picture of him. Having been in Dachau concentration camp for up to 5 months after Kristallnacht. And this is a picture of the memorial in Frankfurt am Main made after the destruction on Kristallnacht, which was the 9th of November 1938. He was allowed to leave Dachau and Germany if he could be financially guaranteed by another country. My mother's elder sister's husband was a pharmacist and able to provide the financial guarantee. And we know that from the, this is the ADR slip that they all filled in. And we found them about a couple of years after we found the lock safe. So to continue with the story of 1940, on the 10th of May, 1940, when Churchill became Prime Minister, he argued to collar the lot of Jewish refugees from Nazism, already called enemy aliens, and this was some 30 to 40,000 people. The year June 1940 to June 1941 was most dramatic and is the key to my story. It is the year of the indignities of internment. From my family's point of view, this meant that my father lost his job at Kendal Gent in Gorton, Manchester on 20th of June 1940. He'd arrived almost less than 4 years earlier to work at Kendal Gent. He was arrested on the 20th of June from this post, and he went with his elder brother Ernst and his father to Hoyton near Liverpool, to what was called the aliens internment camp. And the three of them went on the 26th of June. The three men were interned as enemy aliens or imprisoned without trial. The three women, being elderly, Bertha, Clemmy and Clara, lived in 76 Woodland Road without any resources, but were called internees at liberty. What a contradiction in terms. So I now want to read a little bit about all of this from the book. Chapter 8 is called Jewish Refugees Not Wanted. Why? 20th of June 1940 to 10th of March 1941. The hurt and heartache of Kurt's internment as an enemy alien. On 20th of June 2022, I penned a long entry on Facebook titled Jewish Refugees Not Wanted, Why? Reflections on Internment in the 1940s. I repeated it on the 20th of June 2023 and received many encouraging replies, as I had done in 2022. Esther wrote the very poignant comment in her tiny diary on 20th of June 1940, 82 years before. Quoting from my Facebook entries, Esther's short remark is full of resonance, given that it is World Refugee Day and Refugee Week 2022. Healing is the theme this year. Writing this is hopefully a healing experience, not only for me, but for the wider family and for the family of refugees today. It is a very emotional experience for me to read her tiny diary, which was recently found in a small brown handbag or large purse. This bag had been secreted away in my elder sister's house. When and why the bag was left there is and always will be a mystery, given my sister's loss of memory. The contents of the bag relieve what have been mysteries about aspects of my parents' early lives together in the build-up to and during the early years of World War II. There were a few precious documents, including the diary, and over 150 letters, mainly from my father from 1938 to 1941. These letters and documents clarify and elaborate on the brief remarks in the tiny diary. They also expand our knowledge about what had been family anecdotes when my two sisters and I were growing up. But there is still a lot of information missing. There are, unfortunately, none of the letters written whilst my father was interned for 9 months. And yet my mother recorded in her diary every time my father wrote to her and every time she wrote to him. My mother's then fiance, my father, had that day, June 20th, 1940, been dismissed from his professional engineering post. He was about to be interned in Hoyton near Liverpool. Her diary also records that she'd become engaged less than 2 months earlier, and that the public announcement was on the 1st of May, her birthday. She was clearly extremely upset by the turn of events and was only able to recall fragmentary pieces, but they are revealing of what the situation must have felt like. I've been very affected by reading the diary, the letters and postcards. I found it a searing and distressing experience. I've only been able to do it in short bursts. I've been shocked at how upset I've been and realised how enduring trauma and intergenerational traumas can be. It has forced me to try to record the experiences and events for posterity. I wonder as I write whether that was my mother's intention, unconscious though it may have been. She certainly writes about her concerted campaign to try to save my father from the indignities of internment. My father was a German-Jewish refugee from Nazism. As I've written in several places, though, my mother admonished me for using the term refugee to refer to my father. She always asserted that he came to a professional engineering post. Since my parents have died, we've discovered that he arrived in Manchester on his birthday. So in that sense, he had a job and so was not a fugitive. But as the build-up to the war and the progress of the war revealed, this difference was illusory. Perhaps her denials were to comfort herself that all became well after the war, as a form of projection. The safety of becoming a refugee in England turned out to be short-lived. They were all interned in late June 1940. Uncle Ernst had been in the country 15 months and my grandfather only 11 months. Some of this information was available from the National Archives. We found out about it in February 2020, but the details of where and when were not fully recorded. Some of Uncle Ernst's records were closed for 100 years to 2047. The National Archives agreed to send them to me during lockdown, revealing that MI5 had been involved in checking on him after internment. I run ahead of the story of internment. There is little of note in the letters for the remaining period of 1939, nor in her diary of 1940 to 20th of June. Some of the letters are about the start of her campaign during the spring of 1940 to change my father's status and obtain another job. She got her dearly beloved brother, Joe Lee, to help and for him to enlist the support of his close friend, Mrs. Eileen Wren Howard, wife of the managing director of Jonathan Cade, who had friends in very high places. But all of this changed very rapidly once my father was interned. And I should add that although my mother admonished me for using the term Jewish refugee, in her diary from 1940, she herself uses that term. The final bit I want to read about this early period was, in her diary, so Thursday, the 10th of October, she writes, "Nasty shock. Kurt sent message, going to Ramsey. I hope to see him soon." And then Friday, the 11th of October, letter from Kurt of 7th, going away. I hope it's not further. And there's nothing else in the diary. But this is a picture of House 16, Mora Aliens Internment Camp, Ramsey, on the Isle of Man. And I visited there on July the 20th. And the second picture is showing where the barbed wire was concreted into the road around all those Victorian boarding houses. So I now want to round off the story of the year 20th of June 1940 to the 22nd of June 1941. And I want to end by how my mother had to buy back her British citizenship after she lost it on marriage on the 22nd of June 1941. This is a picture of their wedding. And she once married to my father, because he was an enemy alien, she lost her British citizenship. So They moved to Yorkshire on marriage, and almost immediately after Esther had settled down in Skipton, she contacted an old friend of hers who was also the family solicitor back in Manchester. She wanted to start the process of applying for renaturalisation. There is a letter in her papers from Leslie Lever, solicitors, Princess Chambers, Manchester 2, to my mother. However, the process proved rather lengthy. On the 22nd of November, Esther received this letter from the Home Office in Bournemouth, but from the Under Secretary of State Nationality Department, saying that she would be granted a certificate of naturalisation on receipt of the appointed fee of 5 shillings. It was signed Your Obedient Servant, D.R.S. Davis. Esther was still required to go through several more legal hoops before being granted the certificate. She had to fill out a lengthy form, including the signing of an oath of allegiance. This became her certificate of naturalisation, granted to a woman who was at birth a British subject and is married to a subject of a state at war with His Majesty, Home Office, etc. The copy for signature arrived on the 22nd of December 1941, 6 months to the day after her wedding. On a question in the details, it said that she had no occupation. How degraded and humiliated she must have felt. She'd been a professional teacher for over 10 years, including a spell as a head teacher of an elementary school. It was then signed and returned and registered with the Home Office. The countersigned copy was returned on the 3rd of January 1942, when she was already living at 21 Arncliffe Road in Keighley, in rented rooms, according to the accompanying letter. Kurt had to go through a similar process some 5 years later when he became eligible to apply for naturalisation. This was in 1946. And this is a picture of my mother's national registration identity card, which said she acquired British nationality despite birth in Britain. So I just want to make a couple more points before handing over to my daughter. First of all, I want to mention that Leslie Lever became a Labour MP. He was a solicitor who arranged my mother's renaturalisation. He then became the Mayor of Manchester and was elevated to the House of Lords. On the way, he helped people with financial insecurities. So he was quite a famous Labour MP. His younger brother was Harold Lever, 10 years younger, was also a famous Labour MP. Finally, putting this information together tells an emotional but fascinating story of resilience and stoicism in the face of tremendous difficulties. Kurt, with Esther's help and petitioning Parliament about Ernst in Dachau and then the 3 men's internment, and the 3 women living penniless in Manchester. And my conclusion is that the British state was very harsh to enemy aliens and their families and has never compensated or apologised, either to the David family for internment and its consequences, or to Esther for losing her British citizenship and having to buy it back. Since my writing, there remains a puzzle. Why were the passports in a locked safe? I never tried to answer that question when I was writing. But as an aside, I met a woman who told me that her father's Austrian passport is now in the National Archives at Kew. She's not allowed to have it, as it is now the British government's. So did the British state confiscate the passports? Is that why the 5 were in the locked safe? I can't really seem to find an answer. I do feel they were in the lot saved, though, to deal with loss of identity, and they need to feel somehow attached to some semblance of dignity. So I now turn over to Charlotte, who's going to tell an even more emotional story of being third generation. And this is a picture of Charlotte's wedding that took place on my father's birthday, but some 85 years after he died. Over to you, Charlotte, now.
Hello, hi. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Here we go. So this year marks the 51st anniversary of my paternal grandmother and my namesake, Charlotte Reiner's passing from cancer. My chapter in my mother's book is dedicated to her memory, as it is all about her experiences in the Holocaust. As my mother says in her book, from a young age, I've been interested in reading about the Holocaust. My mum always reminds me that she received a letter from Janina Bauman. Oops. Oh no, so I was engrossed with books such as Ellie, Coming of Age in the Holocaust. My mum always reminds me that she received a letter from Janina Bauman saying that at the age of 9, I was her youngest reader, and this is the cover of the book that I was very interested in reading. And I carried on this interest. Even though I studied languages and French and Spanish for my degree, I managed to find a way to research the Holocaust for my dissertation, and I wrote about children in the Holocaust, reading Elie Wiesel's La Nuit. So when my mother was writing this book, she asked me to contribute a chapter, and I decided to explore the experiences of my father's family in Hungary, and in particular, my grandmother Charlotte. And I would like to read to you an extract now from the book. My grandmother Charlotte was born into a Jewish family in Hungary on the 10th of September, 1915, as the First World War was raging across the globe. Sorry, I actually wanted to show you a photo before I did that. Here, this is my grandmother with my father. He is online, so he can probably tell you exactly when it was taken. My grandmother Charlotte was born into a Jewish family in Hungary on the 10th of September 1915 as the First World War was raging across the globe. Her father Mordechai was a soldier on the German side in the war, and he died from his wounds when she was a young baby. She grew up with her mother and many siblings in Vargs, a tiny village on what is now the border between Hungary and Croatia. Her family were very poor, but Charlotte recognized the importance of education and was determined to become a teacher. She was successful in obtaining a scholarship to a teacher training college in Miskolc. She moved there, and after completing her studies, she secured her first job as a teacher of English. It was in Miskolc in the early 1930s that she first met my grandfather, Bela, known to me and his other grandchildren as Grandy. My Grandy was born in Hungary on the 29th of May, 1905, into a religious Jewish family, but he met Charlotte during a rebellious period in his life when he identified as an atheist. His father strongly disapproved of their relationship, thinking that Charlotte was too poor and not religious enough for his son, and he urged Bela to break up with her. Very much still under his father's influence, he agreed, and they went their separate ways. Charlotte moved to Budapest to take up another teaching position, whilst Bela stayed in Miskolc. When the Second World War broke out in 1939, Hungary, under the leadership of Admiral Miklos Horthy, was an ally of Germany. Life became progressively more unpleasant for Hungarian Jews because of widespread anti-Jewish practices and anti-Jewish policies implemented in emulation of Germany's Nuremberg laws. Indeed, life was made very difficult for my Grandy as he was conscripted into a forced labor battalion in the Hungarian army, which was fighting alongside the Germans, and he was forced to work as a translator. He managed somehow to leave the army and return to his family in Miskolc. Yet the worst was still to come. With the German occupation of Hungary in March 1944, the deportation and extermination of the Hungarian Jews began and proceeded rapidly. Between May and July that year, in less than 2 months, nearly 440,000 Jews were deported from the provinces of Hungary in more than 145 trains, my grandfather Bela and his family among them. The family of my grandmother Charlotte separated from his father by a Nazi selection in Miskolc. My grandfather and 2 of his able-bodied brothers were deemed able to work and transported to a labor camp. The rest of the family, the old women and children, were sent straight to the extermination camp Auschwitz and to their deaths. In just a few months, more than half of Hungary's Jews were wiped out. The family of my grandmother Charlotte suffered in equal measure. Charlotte, working in Budapest as a tutor for a Christian child, had established a close relationship with the child's family, and they bravely agreed to shelter her as if she were one of them. But other family members still in Barts were not so fortunate. Just before the direct German occupation, Charlotte's mother, sensing what was to come, came looking for her daughter, desperate to hide with her and the Christian family. Charlotte, fearing that they would both be caught and killed, urged her mother to return to Barts. She was so terrified that it would be obvious to the Nazis that they were both Jews in hiding. Tragically, the Jews in Barts and the surrounding villages were rounded up almost immediately and taken to Auschwitz. Charlotte's mother and many other family members perished in the death camp. This guilt and loss haunted Charlotte for the rest of her life. Years later, as she lay delirious in her hospital bed, dying from cancer, she cried and cried for her mother, begging for her forgiveness. I'm going to end my extract there. The rest of my chapter explores the question of the impact of the Holocaust upon the 3rd generation of Holocaust survivors like myself. Here's a picture I took, my husband took, and here is a picture of me with my sons and my husband, and when we visited my half-brother at university. And sorry to Toby, my brother, that he's not in it, but I couldn't find a picture cheap enough, and he knows what I mean. So my chapter explores the question of the impact of the Holocaust upon the 3rd generation of Holocaust survivors like myself. And I wonder, to what extent do the traumatic experiences of our grandparents and our parents affect us today? I was fascinated reading other 3rd generation accounts for my chapter and establishing links with my own experiences. And I would be interested to hear from all of you, and if anyone has any questions. And over to my mum. Is she?
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you both very much.